Like a good song, marriage requires the right balance of melody, harmony, and rhythm. Longtime friends of the American Family Association, Barbie and Terry Franklin, share stories and music in their new DVD set, Love Sings, The Artistry of Marriage.
It'll change your marriage like this.
Produced by American Family Studios, Love Sings is now available at afastore.net.
If the email is correct, it directly contradicts what Brennan said under oath.
Exactly.
What's going on with Fox, by the way? What's going on there?
We've got the town hall with Pete Buttigieg.
Buttigieg.
There you go. Don't you think it's just great to see the fact that you've got a guy there on the stage with his husband, and it's normal. It's not even
I think
seen
it's
as a big deal.
absolutely fine. I do. Buttigieg.
Whether it's New York and Virginia, or whether it's Alabama and Missouri, people have gone to the wings, if you will.
Isn't it a sign of great progress in the country that that's just...
Yeah, I think it's great. Buttigieg.
There you go.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, your congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host.
As always.
And glad to have you in the conversation today as my congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent listening audience.
As always.
All right, well, we've got a lot we're going to get to today, so let us jump right into it. I got to find one thing that I am looking for before we jump into that, and then we'll get right after it. Just a couple of quick things. I want to remind you that we have podcasts available. You missed the program, you can go to the podcast page, go to afr.net, which, by the way, is a place where you can also audio stream the broadcast, afr.net, live audio stream it, just as we live video stream it on Facebook, live video stream on YouTube. And those broadcasts are recorded, so they're available on our YouTube website. They're available on the Facebook website if you'd like to catch the program later if you happen to miss it during the day. So I encourage you to keep that in mind.
And you know what else, Brian? A lot of the wonders of these phones now, there's a lot of apps that you can get that are pretty easy to use. You can find the Focal Point podcast page and subscribe to it every day after Rob puts it in. Generally about 10, 15 minutes after the show, it'll automatically be available to you every day.
You know, I was reading today that latest thing in Mexico City is people are buying fake cell phones.
Why?
Because they keep getting ripped off. If they're bus passengers, if they're pedestrians, somebody holds them up, they always want their cell phone. So they buy a fake and stick it in their wallet. So a guy comes up and holds them up. Here's my cell phone.
Well, that's bad.
And it's got a rock in it or something like that, so it doesn't work.
A decoy cell phone.
Yeah, so those cell phones won't work if Focal Point's the program that you are looking for. Anyway, glad to have you in the conversation as we begin today. So don't forget that. Don't forget that you've got the podcast where you can catch the program if you happen to miss it during the day. Listen to it at your leisure. You can subscribe to it and all that kind of stuff. Also want to remind you that we're heading toward Father's Day, and we've got a special Father's Day promotion in connection with the book, a special Father's Day offer to you that if you will order a book from the afastore.net bookstore, afastore.net, where do you buy stuff from AFA? At afastore.net. Go there and order one or more than one. Don't hold yourself back, but one or more than one between now and June 7, Friday, June 7. I will make sure, I will see to it that you get a signed copy of the book for whatever that may mean to you, but a signed copy as a special offer. But for everybody that orders a copy of the book between now, today, and June 7. It actually started yesterday. So order a book from AFA Store and I will see to it that you get a signed copy of the book.
I have the feeling you've been signing a lot of books lately.
Well, I have at that, and I hope there'll be a home for all of them. You know, because the real idea here, it's the Boy to Man book is the name of the book. I think I forgot to mention that, but the Boy to Man book, it's a book that I've written designed for fathers to read with their 12-year-old sons. That's the purpose. I want to picture in my mind as fathers who love their 12-year-old sons sitting down and reading through this book with their sons, chapter by chapter, way to mentor them on their way to manhood. That's the idea behind the whole thing. You know, I read this week also that, and this is a note for dads, and I'm going to give some of these fatherhood lessons as we approach fatherhood, our Father's Day. If you want your son to take his faith seriously when you grow up, your example is the single most important factor. For instance, just becoming a regular worshiper of Christ. This is a study from Switzerland, of all places. And what this study from Switzerland reveals is that if a father does not go to church, doesn't matter what his wife does, it doesn't matter what the mother does, she could be in church every time the doors are open. But if the father does not attend worship regularly, there's only a 1 chance in 50. Only one boy in 50 will become a regular Christ worshiper as an adult. But if sons see their fathers worshiping regularly, somewhere between 67% and 75% of them will do the same thing as men. So that becomes absolutely critical that we set the pace, we set the example for our sons to imitate. So again, I want to mention the book is available as a resource, the Boy to Man book, for fathers to read with their 12-year-old sons. Special offer, order a copy between now and June 7. We'll make sure it gets to you in time for Father's Day, and we'll make sure that you get a signed copy. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. Our reading is taking us to the book of Esther. Remember, Esther, her name means star. It's the Hebrew version of Ishtar. Name means star. And we saw yesterday that the king had become Xerxes the First is his name, or Ahasuerus as he's known in Esther. But Ahasuerus, or Xerxes the First, was having a big party for a 180-day party for all of the governors and the officials that ran his kingdom, 127 different provinces, all the way from India to Ethiopia. And toward the end of this 180-day festival, he summoned his wife to come, who was a woman of exceptional beauty, because he was proud of her. And he wanted all of his guests to meet her and be able to see her for the beauty that she was. She refused to come. We're not told why. It doesn't really matter, but she just refused to come. This outraged the king, consulted with his advisors, and they said, look, you can't let this go, because if your kingdom, and remember, there are representatives here from every corner of your kingdom, the word will get back to them that the wife of the king treated him with contempt, treated him with disdain, treated him with a total lack of respect, and got away with it. And that will poison every marriage, every family, every household in your kingdom. You have got to do something about it. So they basically banned Vashti was her name, banned her from the king's presence. It was essentially a divorce decree. And now they've got a king who has no wife. So that's what chapter 2 is about, where they hold basically a beauty contest. This is like the Miss Susa contest, the Miss Ekbatana contest, the Miss Persia contest, the Miss Iran contest, to find a suitable replacement for Queen Vashti. And Esther, because of her exceptional beauty, was brought into the group of women who were part of the pageant. She was one of the women that was going to appear before the king. And the way this worked, they all spent a year getting ready for their one night with the king. All of them would have one night with the king. And when he was done getting to know these women, he would make his pick. He would make a choice between them. Now, Esther got real tight with the guy that was managing all of the women called a harem. Harem just means something that's separated off, divided off, devoted, not available to everybody. It's reserved for a specific purpose. So she was part of this harem. They were all virgins. None of them had known a man. And there was a guy that was running it. He was a eunuch, means he'd been castrated. That's what these ancient kings did, to have men that he could trust to work with the women in his family, the women in his kingdom. He'd have them castrated so they represented no sexual threat to him. But one of these eunuchs was running this pageant. And Esther got to know him, and he took special care of Esther, really liked her. They kind of bonded, almost kind of an uncle and niece kind of a thing. And she received a year of beauty treatments along with all of the other women. And then it was her turn. It was her turn to come before the king. And we're told about Esther that the young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And the young woman, that's Esther, pleased him. That is this Haggai, who's mentioned in some of the other historical sources of the time. She gained great favor in his sight, the guy that was running this whole pageant. She pleased him and won his favor, so he gave her the best place in the harem. And then after 12 months of beauty treatments, it was her time to go before the king. This was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with spices and ointments for women, and then the time came for their audience with the king. And when the time came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her his own daughter, to go to the king, she asked for nothing except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised. So she just took his advice about what to take with her going in to the king. One shot at this deal. Now, Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her, not just Haggai, not just the guy running the pageant, but everybody who saw her regarded her with great favor. Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month. The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then he gave everybody in the kingdom a tax cut in celebration. Now, we're going to go to prayer here, and I'll pray some of these things back to God, but obviously this is the deal where it was Esther's character and her beauty, not one or the other, but her beauty and her character that put her in the position where she was able to protect her people. Now, the important thing to realize is that if she didn't have the beauty, her character wouldn't have made any difference, because the king was looking for a woman who was beautiful. And he found a woman who was not only beautiful in form and appearance, but beautiful in character, had the imperishable quality of a quiet and gentle spirit. So Esther had both of those things going for her, but it was her beauty that opened this door. Now, the point that I want to make is we need to realize if we have, whether it's good looks, whether it's personality, whether it's a particular set of talents in music or whatever, those are gifts of God to you. There's no reason to be proud of those things. There's no reason to pat yourself on the back. You have that because God has given it to you as a gift. And he's given it to you as a gift, your beauty or your brains or whatever it has. He's given it to you as a gift because he wants to use it for his purposes. So don't spend any time, if you're a beautiful woman, don't spend any time trying to convince yourself that you're ugly, because then you're disdaining the gift that God has given you. He's given you that appearance, and then be looking for the ways in which God wants to use that for his purposes, for his kingdom. Well, let's go to prayer. Father, by your grace, Esther was a beautiful young woman, lovely in form and features. It was her physical beauty which brought her first to the attention of the palace and the king. And yet by her character, she won the favor and approval of everyone who saw her. Lord, you have given each of us gifts and abilities which can and will open doors of opportunity for us. You may have given us athletic ability, or intelligence, or beauty, or personality, or unique talents that we may possess in greater degree than those around us. I pray that we will recognize that these are gifts from you, so that we do not become proud or think more highly of ourselves than we ought to think. May we humble ourselves under your mighty hand, so that you may exalt us as you did Esther at the proper time. You lifted Esther from a place of total obscurity to a place of enormous influence. Pray that we will take heart from this and believe that you can use us to serve you and your larger purposes. Amen.
For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. According to the CDC and the Guttmacher Institute, the number one reason women choose abortion is they're not ready for a child. The number two reason, they can't afford a baby. Number three, they don't want any more children. Number four, they don't want to be a single mother. Number five, not mature enough to raise a child. Number six, a baby would interfere with their education or career. Those reasons represent 95% of all abortions. Risk to the mother's physical health represent less than 4% of all abortions, and conception resulting from rape and incest represent less than 1% of all abortions. Abortion is used as birth control.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Next week, I will go back to Princeton University to celebrate my 50th reunion of my graduation with my classmates, and we were asked to give messages, and this is the message that I wrote. I don't know about you, but time seems to have accelerated with each passing decade, underscored by the death of classmates and colleagues. I must confess there is still not a fortnight that goes by that I'm not reminded in some way of what a wonderful education we received at Princeton. A significant part of me would really like to go back, knowing what I know now, and do it all again. I would waste less time and take more advantage of the myriad opportunities to learn with which we were presented. I cherish the friendships made, the horizons opened, and the foundations laid down during those 4 years at Princeton. Since graduating, I have become a husband, a father, a grandfather, and each of these experiences has changed me in profoundly positive ways. How the world has changed on our watch. I hope and pray we made it a little better. I know that most of us tried. The members of the class of '69 have been given much, and remember, to whom much was given, of him will much be required, and from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more. Luke 12:48. The whole 4 years I was at Princeton, I kept these words above my desk. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. Robert Frost's words are etched in my consciousness. May we all resolve to keep our promises, and with whatever time we have left in this life, to finish well. God bless you all. Bon voyage. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. We were chatting on the break about a post that Rob made on his own personal Facebook page. And Rob, why don't you tell us about it and then tell us what happened?
Well, it really was not on my page. One of our listeners tagged Jeff and myself and you in a post. And it's all about Oregon has expanded the right and the ability to fund abortions at, of course, the cost of the taxpayer. And I just posted that basically, that I supported the right of the baby, and it's just gone downhill from there.
Meaning they just came out and jumped all over you and called you names. And
I posted. They're talking about how the rights. Well, I posted, proud to kill babies. That makes me very sad. May God open your eyes and hearts to the needs of the unborn. And boy, they jumped on. How dare you assume this? And may karma rain down upon you are heinous, and people saying go away, and another one saying I'm proud to help women get birth control. Come on, folks. Abortion is murdering of a baby. It is not birth control.
Yeah.
Birth control is before you get pregnant.
Yeah.
I
always say I'm pro-choice before conception, and I am pro-life after.
Yes.
That's when you exercise your right to choose, is before you get yourself or somebody else pregnant.
Yeah, I had another person say, they checked me out and said, this guy's in Mississippi. No wonder. And she called me an it. I said, I'm sure that it is also proud to be a member of Cult 45, which I can only assume is something with Trump.
Yeah.
And is that right?
And what Rob illustrates is something that we've seen here and hadn't really intended when we started the program to start with this, but you realize just listening to the people, reading the comments of the people that responded to Rob's post is, ladies and gentlemen, we are past the point, we are way past the point where we can dialogue with these people. People on the other side of the cultural chasm have absolutely no interest in talking about the issues. They've got no interest in discussing the issues. They have no interest in trying to determine whether that is a human being that has been conceived at the moment of conception. They're not interested in that. What they are interested in doing is yelling at you and yelling at me and calling us names and calling us anti-women and all other sorts of things. You think about it, half the babies that are aborted are female. So who's really taking up the cause of females in America? It's the pro-life community. We want unborn females. We want them to live. We want them to have a chance at life. We want them to have the opportunity to discover the gifts that God has given them and use those gifts in a place of service and influence. But ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is we are involved in a culture war. I mean, it is a war that we're involved in. We're in the middle of it, and we just have to win this thing. And the way we win it is we just have to keep declaring the truth, and we have to keep praying. Don't worry if you're not winning any discussions with people. You're not going to do that. Their minds are made up. They're not going to be confused with the facts. So we have to target our comments to people that may have some possible openness to the truth and speak in such a way that they will be persuaded by what we have to say, that it will resonate with something inside them. They will recognize it as the truth, and they will gravitate to it, like somebody in darkness being drawn to the light. Now, we don't get there by being mean and angry and calling people on the other side names, because that's not going to attract the people that we want to draw to the light. They're going to be touched when they see we still are speaking head on to the people that disagree with us. We're talking directly to them, but they see the way that we talk to them, that we're direct, we're straight on, we don't mince our words, we don't beat around the bush, we don't resort to nuance and all that stuff. We're straight up with what we believe, and we're straight up with why we believe it. And then that'll begin, those that do have some openness to the truth can be influenced by that and move in the direction of the light. One of the things I've talked about is what I have called homosexual privilege. When people talk about white privilege, there's just a whole bunch of white privilege out there. They say everybody who's white has particular privileges. Well, I'm not buying it. In fact, I think that there are two other kinds of privilege that are far more powerful. There's, first of all, minority privilege. There's a special set of preferences and treatments and privileges that go with being a minority. You get a better shot at getting into an elite university. There's a positive absolute penalty against people of pallid skin when they apply to the Ivy League colleges. They got to score 250, 300, 400 points higher on the SAT just to have a shot. That's minority privilege. We have homosexual privilege. Nobody ever would have heard of Pete Buttigieg if it were not for his sexual proclivity. Nobody would know who he is. He's a mayor of a town of about 100,000 people in Indiana. Nobody would have any idea who he is. But he's gliding behind homosexual privilege. That's his battering ram. He's taking shelter. behind homosexual privilege, and he's planning to ride that homosexual privilege all the way to the White House. And you want to ask yourself whether that's homosexual privilege or not. Well, it is. Try criticizing Pete Buttigieg for his sexual behavior and see what happens to you. And I'm looking here. I just noticed this in my Google alert thing. Miki Addison is a part of our lineup here at American Family Radio. She got flagged by Right Wing Watch because she said that gay Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg, quote, engages in violent sexual acts with a person he claims to love, end quote. That is absolutely true. Homosexual sex is by definition a violent act. It involves, well, I'm not going to get any more graphic than this, but it involves putting parts of the human body to violent uses they were not designed for. That's a form of sexual abuse, no matter whether it's a broomstick or something else. That's sexual abuse going on there. So what Mickey said is exactly right. So Right Wing Watch now has flagged her as an out-and-out hater. Give you another example of homosexual privilege. Ohio State, Washington Post, they're trying to get Jim Jordan in trouble. He was a wrestling coach at Ohio State. There was a doctor there, Dr. Richard Strauss, who was an athletics doctor, so he provided medical care to a lot of the athletes in the Ohio State program. He sexually abused 177 male athletes from 1979 to 1996. That's 17, 18 years. And athletes in the Ohio State program complained to the administration about that. Now, Jim Jordan was a wrestling coach off in that part of the deal. Nobody came and complained to him about what this guy was doing. But there were complaints that filtered up to the head of the athletic department and filtered up to the administration of Ohio State University. What was done about this guy? For 2 decades, he had been sexually assaulting male athletes. These are homosexual acts of violence, homosexual acts of aggression. A lot of them non-consensual. He was abusing them. And administration knew about it. What did they do? They did nothing. Zero, zip, nada. Why? That is homosexual privilege at work. You could not get away with abusing 177 people in an environment like that over the space of 2 decades. You would be sitting in a prison cell right now. But this guy is homosexual, so he gets away with it. Excuse me. All right. Okay, so that's homosexual privilege. They're trying to hang that around Jim Jordan's neck, but it's not going to work. Jeff, could you see if you could grab me a thing of water? My apologies. Let me see if I can take a sip of my coffee.
You know, Brian, going back to the abortion thing, one of the comments was an embryo is not a baby. It said, "May God open your eyes to science." And I'm going, really? That at conception, it's a baby, in my opinion.
Well, you know, listen, in the opinion,
in science's opinion,
because a new being has come into existence. That, whatever you want to call it, it's a baby. But you want to call it something else, knock yourself out. But that, whatever it is, has a completely brand new and unique genetic footprint. It's got unique chromosomes. It's separate entity from its mother completely, separate blood flow, everything, circulation system, genetic makeup, and all that kind of stuff. It is a baby, and that's what science teaches. That is science. Now, here's a winnable war moment from Alabama Public Television. Oh, by the way, I just want to touch on one other thing, that the snarkiness toward Rob because of the state that he's from. And you see a lot of that in the left. They feel, I mean, that is just nothing but contempt. It's mindless contempt. It's a sense of elitism. It's a sense of self-appointed superiority and condescension. It reeks. So that goes on the left. And they think just because of where you're from, that they're entitled to look down their nose at you and make assumptions about how much you know, how educated you are, and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. We just have to defeat these people. No point in trying to out-argue them. We just got to defeat them because this is a war we're involved in. It's a culture war. And here's the winnable war moment from Alabama Public Television. Some of you might be familiar with a program on PBS called Arthur. I'm not familiar with it until this story popped up, but it's aimed at kids, and it's a PBS thing. That's your tax dollars and mine at work. And this program, Arthur, was scheduled to air an episode that featured Mr. Ratburn coming out of the closet as a raging homosexual and getting married to his homosexual partner, married, quote, end quote. So that was the nature of this special. Well, Alabama Public Television heard about this, and they said, we're not going to air that. And the reason they explained is very, very good. This is what they, let's see, he's the director of programming, Mark McKenzie is his name. This is what he said. Parents have trusted Alabama Public Television for more than 50 years. Parents have trusted us for more than 50 years. He said this, parents trust that their children can watch Alabama Public Television without their supervision. And it says we're going to make sure that it stays that way. We have a trust with the parents, and we are going to honor that trust. This program, they said, does not fit into those parameters.
Amen.
You know, and with regard to the issue of whether homosexuals can change their stripes, so to speak, looking at a story from the Daily Signal here about a guy who was exposed early on in his life to gay pornography. He was sexually abused by boys in the neighborhood. So when he first began to merge into puberty, his sexual desires had already been pre-stamped toward homosexual. So he began to think that that's who he was, but it just wrecked his life emotionally and every other way. Finally broke down at age 17 with the help of his parents. He got into a ministry that helped people redirect their sexual energies and their sexual commitments. You know, and he's talking about the fact that you've got laws now, this Equality Act that the House voted on the other day. If that is passed by the Senate and goes into law, that would prohibit people like this individual from getting help, because it would become illegal against the law anywhere in America to help somebody that was in the situation that this individual happened to be in and help them deal with their unwanted same-sex attractions. That would be a crime. You would be defrocked of your license, your therapeutic license, the ability, the freedom to counsel. You'd be put completely out of business. And this guy goes on to say, you know, he says, if counseling bans had been the law in 1989, blocking me from the therapy I was asking for, I probably would have killed myself. I would not have been satisfied with a government-mandated gay identity. You know, and we see that with people that go through the transition. 41% of them commit suicide. That's what transgenderism, that made-up term, people who get so confused that they think they're born in the wrong body, and they pursue that, they accept that lie about themselves, they wind up killing themselves, doing Satan's bidding. Satan came to what? Lie, kill, steal, murder, and destroy. If he can get a young man to believe he's really a woman trapped inside a man's body, or if he can get a young man to believe that it's normal to engage in sexual activity with other males, then they will do Satan's work for him. He doesn't have to kill them because they will do it to themselves. And this is what he went on to say. His life did change. He experienced a change in his sexual desires. During that period of time, I wanted a wife, and I wanted my own children. I wanted friendships with other men without treating them as objects, both seemingly unattainable. But he went through this period of therapeutic reorientation. I met a woman, he says. We fell in love, and we've been married since 2006. She's my only lover and best friend. Together we have 4 beautiful children. I no longer have desires typical of a gay man. So what does that mean? That means that change is possible. It means that someone who experiences same-sex urges, maybe even yields to them for a time, nobody is trapped in that prison. So that's another winnable war moment. Here's another one if you like ESPN. I was watching a little ESPN last night as my Golden State Warriors finished sweeping the Portland Trailblazers in the Western Conference semifinals. But the president of ESPN, his name is Jimmy Pitaro, listen to this. He said, without question, our data tells us our fans do not want us to cover politics. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get back, but that's a winnable war. We'll be right back.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I was finishing undergrad and got credit cards because I couldn't work full-time, so that started the credit card journey for me.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
And then when I got married, we combined our credit card debt, and it became impossible to pay off on our own. At that point, I was like, I don't know where to turn. And then I found Trinity.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
I initially was scared to call, and immediately I felt relief. I mean, in a matter of 3 years, we've already paid down $20,000 in credit card debt, which is huge.
Call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
AFR's own J.J. Jasper is a morning on-air personality, author, comedian, Christian, and family man. J.J.'s also a keynote speaker at banquets, men's ministry events, pregnancy center fundraisers, and more. Here's what others are saying.
JJ helped us set a record for the most funds raised at our banquet. This banquet was our best banquet ever, thanks to JJ Jasper.
Information on JJ's availability to speak at your event is at jjjasper.com.
Bishop E.W. Jackson.
Every single one of us who's been saved was once on the other side. You know, the Bible says, and such were some of you. Before I got saved, I knew things were wrong, but I figured as long as I didn't get caught, what difference did it make? But the thing is, he changes you down on the inside anyway, so that you don't want to do what's wrong.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
You get the soil ready. You put the seeds in and then you water it.
How do you plant a garden?
I don't know. You pray that God will give you a good harvest. Then you have to work it to get all the weeds away. And then God brings the plants.
Planting a garden takes planning, hard work, and God's blessing. So does creating a lasting legacy for the people and charities that mean the most to you. The AFA Foundation is here to help you sow the financial seeds God has blessed you with in order for them to blossom for generations to come. We do this by offering free consultation and assistance in the areas of charitable gift annuities, estate planning, will and trust planning, and bequests. To learn more, call 800-326-4543, extension 345. 800-326-4543, extension 345, or visit afafoundation.net.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Close the loop on the ESPN story. You know, the president of ESPN, Jimmy Pitaro, said, our data tells us that our fans do not want us to cover politics. Remember, this all goes back to Colin Kaepernick and refusing to stand for the national anthem. Anyway, but he doesn't tell us what that data is. What data are you talking about, Jimmy Pitaro? Well, here are some data points. Maybe this was a part of the equation. 15 million lost subscribers.
Yeah, that'll do it. 15
million people stopped paying you money every month to watch your programming. Was that the data you're talking about? What about the massive layoffs at ESPN? Was that the data that you're talking about? You just couldn't afford to pay them because nobody's watching your product anymore. And what about the ratings crash? What about going into the dumpster with your ratings? Did that have something to do with it? And he said they are going to steer commentators away from political discussions on air and on social media. I believe that some of our talent was confused, he said, on what was expected of them. No, they weren't confused. They knew that you were okay with it. They knew that you thought this was trendy, that this was hip, that this was going to appeal to millennials. That's what you thought. But he said, I think our talent was confused. Not my fault. They were confused about what we expected of them. If you fast forward to today, I don't believe they are confused. Now, I hope he means that, because that means that would be a good way to get fired on ESPN. If you hear your boss say, I don't believe our on-air folks are confused anymore about whether we like politics on air, good way to find out is keep trying it and see how quickly you get yourself fired. So that's a winnable war moment. ESPN getting their mind at it. You know, really hadn't even noticed. I've been watching the Warriors in the playoffs here, and I didn't realize how refreshing it was not to have to put up with any political blather. It was just a respite. It's why you watch athletics.
You want to get away from it.
You want to get away from that stuff.
Sure.
So anyway, that is potentially a good thing. Now here's another winnable war moment, the Reed Report for today. You know, and God tells the rich, tells the people that are rich not to be proud, but to be generous and ready to share with those who have less. Let's listen.
Yeah, a Christian-based, Christian-owned company called the Burley Man Coffee out of Florida. It's kind of a subscription coffee place. Has decided to use their profits. They've just announced that they're going to gift 100 single mothers in need with a car. These are women that are really in need and help. Need the help to make their lives a little bit easier. They started with one person that they felt a real drawing to really give her a hand, a woman with a son that was severely, has a severe case of autism, and they just were so blessed by helping her out with a car that they vowed now and decided to gift at least 100 more single women that really need. And then basically this is why I like this Reed Report for the home of muscular Christianity, because it's called the Burley Man Coffee.
Yeah, Burley Man.
It's basically the guy who wants
Sounds
to
like
say
our kind of coffee shop.
Yeah, he's saying that he wants to restore the good name of masculinity within the community, that men can be, a sign of a good man is that they're loving, generous, kind-hearted, and patriotic.
And they provide and they protect. That's what a real man does.
And they realize that a lot of these women are in these tough situations because men have abandoned them, so they're going to stand in the gap and try to help wherever they can.
That is fantastic news.
Good story.
Good stuff. Yeah, that is a great story. You know, and what these folks are finding, I don't know anything about their spiritual lives. I don't know if you do either, Jeff, but what they are discovering.
They are Christian. I do
they're
know
Christians.
that. Yeah.
Okay. What they're discovering is what the Bible says. It is more blessed to give than to receive. Now, you got a lot of people out there that don't believe that. You know why they don't believe that it's more blessed to give than to receive? Because they've never done it.
Yeah.
If they tried it, just gave away some of what God had entrusted them with, they would discover the richness and the satisfaction of helping someone without expecting anything in return, and you truly see it is more blessed to give than to receive. All right, let's squeeze in some sound bites. Let's start with clip number 1. This is Judge Napolitano, and he raises an interesting question here about John Brennan. Let's listen.
Basically, what Trey Gowdy was saying was there was an email which was sent by Jim Comey to his leading upper echelon staff, including Baker and Peter Strzok and Andrew McCabe. And in that email, he writes to them, Brennan is insisting the Crown material, being the dossier, be included in the intel assessment, Judge. That's different than what Brennan testified.
Well, you know, there's obviously a conflict between what one said in an email, presumed to be accurate because he's communicating to his staff, and what another said retroactively under oath. if the email is correct, it directly contradicts what Brennan said under oath.
Exactly.
Which is another thing for the folks in Connecticut to examine, whether or not the former director of the CIA perjured himself in order to make himself look good.
Okay, so perjured himself to make himself look good. This is John Brennan. This is at a time when everybody was in a race to see who could get Trump in the most trouble and the deepest hole the fastest. And remember, since the Mueller report has come out, no collusion, no obstruction. What they've been doing instead is trying to point the fingers at each other to get themselves off the hook, to get out of a jam. So Comey has been pointing the finger at Brennan. That stuff about what happened in that motel room in Moscow that was supposed to have happened with Donald Trump and the ladies of the night, that was be totally bogus, completely unverified, just a smear, just an innuendo, just defamation of character. And everybody now knows it. There's nothing to it. It was unverified. The whole basis for the Trump-Russia investigation, there's nothing there. There's no foundation for it. Now they're trying to get as far away from it as they possibly can. Remember, we were saying this yesterday, that if the Steele dossier was everything they claimed it to be, everybody would be out there right now trying to take credit for it. Yeah, I was the one that made sure that the CIA saw this. I was the one that made sure that it was included in intelligence reports. No, they're not saying that. Nobody wants to own this thing. Nobody wants to accept responsibility for it. They're all trying to now shift the blame to somebody else. So anyway, that's the way that thing is. That's the way that thing is drifting. It doesn't look good. You know, Bill Barr, whatever else he is, he's. I think he's a pit bull on this stuff. You know, and I think he's a guy. You know, if I was a member of the FBI or the law enforcement community, I would just be royally cheesed off at what these guys have done to the reputation of the FBI. That would bother me a lot. Or the Department of Justice. As a longstanding member of FBI or DOJ, I would care about the institution. I would know what it stands for. I would know what it has stood for. I would know that it's supposed to be driven by a pure and incorruptible devotion to truth, to the law, and to justice. And I would be hacked off at what these guys have done to an organization, an institution that I love. And I think that's part of what's motivating Bill Barr. Now let's grab clip number 2. This is an interview between Donald Trump and Steve Hilton, who's over at Fox News. Let's listen to clip 2.
So E-Verify is going to be possibly a part of it. The one problem is E-Verify is so tough that in some cases, like farmers, they're not equipped for E-Verify. I mean, I say this against Republicans. A lot of the Republicans say you go through an E-Verify. I used it when I built the hotel down the road on Pennsylvania Avenue. I use a very strong E-Verify system. And we would go through 28 people, 29, 30 people before we found one that qualified.
Right.
So it's a very tough thing to ask a farmer to go through that. So in a certain way, I speak against myself, but you also have to have a world of some practicality.
All right, so Trump, bottom line there is he's starting to backtrack on E-Verify. That's the bottom line there. It's onerous for farmers. They don't have the time to do it. Maybe they don't have the resources to do it. So we are not going to expect them to do it, or we're going to cut them some slack. Well, I mean, you start cutting one group, one person some slack, pretty soon you're doing it for everybody, because if you're not, then that's not fair, and you'll start feeling that kind of keenly. So that's a little bit disappointing that Donald Trump has flashed to that so soon in the argument. But just a couple of quick data points on where we're at with immigration. ICE is looking for a contractor, a private contractor, that they're going to pay with our money. They're not going to pay for it with their money. They're going to use our money to pay a private contractor to transport 225,000 migrant children and families to shelters across the country. I mean, this is just craziness. We're welcoming them into our country. We are flying them to wherever in the country they want to go. We're funding their education. We're funding their medical care. We're providing them food and shelter and clothing. So no wonder things are getting worse by the day. Homeland Security has been releasing into the interior of the United States 1,000 1,100 illegal aliens every single solitary day. 1,000 a day are being released into the interior of the United States. That can't be good. They're winding up who knows where. You know, and there's been a lot of talk about we got to keep families together. This is all about family. We can't separate parents from their children. Well, it turns out that 30% of the families that show up at the southern border are not families at all. And they've discovered this by doing random DNA tests of the immigrant adults who are suspected, that's interesting. You can start saying suspected, and you can kind of have a tough time getting out of that first syllable. Suspected. Anyway, so they do cheek swabs for these adults that claim that they're the parents, and they find that they're not related to them whatsoever at all. So total fraud there at the border, and that's 30% of the people that show up. And if you want a snapshot about where the Democrats are truly at on this whole deal, there's a new rule that the Department of Housing and Urban Development issued this week, which will enforce existing law. This is existing law, meaning this is something that Congress has passed. Our elected representatives put this standard into effect, requiring that people who receive public housing be U.S. citizens. In other words, if you are going to be carried, if your lifestyle is going to be carried by the taxpayers in the United States, if they're going to pay your freight, we are going to expect at a minimum that you be a citizen of this country. And it's the Democrats that are coming out screaming like banshees against this restriction. So they clearly do not want taxpayer resources to be reserved for those who actually have the legal right to live here. And realize that public housing is always in limited supply. You don't have an unlimited supply. So essentially what they're saying, we want to prioritize illegal aliens ahead of United States citizens when it comes to subsidized housing. You know, and you wonder why this doesn't get more attention. But our friends at MRC did a study of every network news evening broadcast from January 1 to May 15 of this year, and found there were a total of 234 stories that talked about illegal immigration. And they counted up, it turns out that less than 1/10 of those stories, 22 out of 234, actually let viewers know that apprehensions at the U.S. border have surpassed 100,000 a month. They just don't tell people. They don't mention that fact. That's why people don't know, because they depend on the major news outlets and they're not getting information. 100,000 a month are crossing our borders and disappearing into the interior. So this Harvard-Harris poll found that 87% of respondents guessed that the number of border apprehensions was way lower. 52% of them thought it was about 100,000 a year. That is 1/12 of the actual problem. So the mainstream media doing their best to cover up the problem of illegal immigration. I don't know if you saw this story. There's a guy by the name of David Panek. He was caught on video shooting his friend dead. Shot him dead in a parking garage. The only reason he was caught is somebody had a car vandalized and put a security camera on it, and they saw this guy from Cuba, illegal immigrant, shooting his friend cold dead. Now here's the deal. He was first arrested in 2007. His nickname is Psycho. First arrested in 2007, he stabbed a man several times while robbing him. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison for attempted murder and armed robbery, then attacked jail guards at the facility, finally released in 2017, remained in the custody of ICE for a month, during which time a judge ordered that he be sent back to Cuba. Good, needs to be deported. Got no room for criminal illegal aliens. You know what happened? Cuba wouldn't take him back. Cuba said, we're not going to accept him back. He's a bad actor. He's a criminal. He belongs here, but we're not going to. You're stuck with him. So the United States is now stuck with this guy. Well, that's it for today. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap. Never forget, we're fighting winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio. Faith.